Good afternoon from Southeast Asia. We're going to do something weird tonight. Ain't talking about aliens or cats. Just a weird story that I want to tell. And I like to tell stories. And it's my channel. So I'm gonna. Long time ago I knew a couple. Man and a woman. Knew them quite well. Lived around them. They were family. They had a child. He was 2 or 3 years old. And they were, except for money problems, they were a happy couple, happy family. It was a good kid, good wife, good husband. You know, they were struggling, but that's life. Sometimes that's just life, and that's all there is to it. And when the first son was 2 or 3, the wife discovered she was pregnant again. And since they were already struggling financially, this was a little bit bittersweet news. The wives, generally in these situations, they tend to think, well, we'll make do. We'll figure it out. If we have to go up and down the alleys and find cats and skin them, eat their livers, you know, we're going to do okay anyway because this is our family. Husbands tend to be a little more pragmatic, and they're like, well, that's good. That's okay. That's wonderful news, honey. But we're kind of like behind on the rent, and we're putting $2 worth of gas in the car every time, and geez, okay. Well, I'm really happy. Really happy. I'll sharpen some knives, and we'll start watching for the hangouts of the local cats, Okay, so a pregnancy term takes 9 months, unless you're an aardvark, and then it's different. I forget how long for them. I don't really give a shit. After a couple of months, the husband began to feel an uneasiness that was superseded the financial worries. He felt a kind of a brooding, dark gloom was being cast over the family. He didn't feel that for the first son, but he's feeling that for the second child. And it's not really pronounced yet. It's only been a couple of months, and he kind of writes it off to, well, we just got a lot of money troubles, and, it's making me depressed and making me feel dark, and, like that. So he does his best to shove it aside and go on one foot in front of the other. And they plod along like that for, a couple more months. And the wife begins to demonstrate that she isn't quite as thrilled with the pregnancy as she was in the first 2 weeks. It's not a problem, but, she's not doing somersaults and handsprings, and, it's okay, we're going to get through it. It's okay. But it's, the mood of the little family unit had changed somewhat. By the 6th month, the father realized that he was feeling quite a bit of darkness here, quite a bit of darkness. Unlike anything he felt with the first child, he'd never felt anything like this in his life. And he didn't like it. They had money troubles when they had the first child also, but he didn't feel anything like he did with the second one. It was odd. It was disconcerting. It was starting to affect his work, and it was starting to affect the family unit as a whole. Tempers were getting a little short. People were getting a little cranky. Depression was setting in pretty pronouncedly. Life was not really rolling along very well at 6 months in this pregnancy. At about 7 months, he realized that his wife was at times, he's sitting across the room, and he'd glance over, and instead of watching TV, he'd glance over at her, and she would be just looking at him, just looking with the sadness in her eyes. She was, at this point, very noticeably depressed. He was. And clearly this was beyond a money problem. This was something else. This was something really, really, really something else. He found eventually that he thought he needed to convey this to her, but he didn't know how. Didn't want to break her heart. What kind of a husband says, hey, I don't really like this whole pregnancy thing. I don't like it. Okay. He didn't know what to do. And clearly something was on her mind. Okay. When they're pushing 8 months, it was pretty much a flat-out emergency. It was time to go see the doctor and say, doctor, can you help us? Because we're crying a lot. We're having thoughts that we shouldn't be having about maybe this life is not such a good life after all. Nothing had changed financially. They were still struggling along, as they always did. But this was serious. This was serious stuff. And at 8 months, the husband couldn't take it anymore. He wanted to simply get in the car and drive away forever, but he loved his wife, loved her dearly, would never leave her, would always take care of her. To his dying breath, he would take care of her. But he had to get this off his chest. He had to. He had no more choice. He was going to blurt it out at some really inappropriate moment if he didn't choose a time and a place and sit down and have a serious talk and say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't know why, but I'm not okay with this child coming into our family. I'm not okay. I'm not okay. I'm sorry, I don't want this child. And that was his thought. And he was trying to figure out some way to verbalize that to her. And he figured that would plunge her deeper into depression. But he didn't know what else to do. He had to get this out in the open. So at some point, they chose a time and they sat down, and he said, look, I'm sorry. This is going to be a heartbreaking talk. I'm going to brace you for it right now. This is breaking my heart. I know it's going to break your heart. I don't know what to do. I'm not telling you I'm going to run away. I'm not leaving you. But I have to tell you, I have serious, terrible, dark, brooding thoughts about bringing this child into our family. And he did convey that to her in a gentler way than that, I hope. But the protein of it got through to her. He said it took him all of a minute and a half, to get that preamble out to her. And he said she sat there and didn't say anything. Her lips began to tremble and tears rolled down her face. And he thought, well, okay, well, I really screwed this up. Maybe I should have just kept this shit to myself and just never said a word. But he didn't know how he could go through life with this new child, seriously not wanting this new child. He had no such feelings about the first one. They were really a happy little 3-person family unit, the 3 of them. That end of things was going along. But this new one, there was something off, something wrong. And he told her that, and she began to cry. And he put his hand on her arm. He said, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't know any other way to say this. I've thought about this for months, trying to figure out how I could say it with the least impact to you. I know it's shocking. I know it's horrible. I doubt that any other husband, father on the face of the earth has ever had to confess something like this to his wife, to his 8-month pregnant wife. God, he just felt so horrible. And she looked at him, tears still streaming down her face, lips still quivering, occasional sob. And she said, I feel exactly the same way. I have felt that way increasingly since this child was conceived. And I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to tell you either. I'm sorry. I can't take care of this child. And that hit him like a 50-gallon drum of ice water down over the head, because he had no idea she felt that way at all. And so they just sat and held hands and slowly, over many hours, talked it through. They looked at all the alternatives, all the options. Maybe once he's born, we'll change. Maybe we'll see things completely differently, And pretty much instantly, they both agreed, no, we feel something dark, and we can't have it in our lives. And they decided tentatively then to give it up for adoption. And they agreed that they would think about it for a few more weeks, just to be 1,000,000,000% sure. So that's what they did. They talked about it, not that much because they had already said what needed to be said, but they thought about it 24/7. I don't think they slept. And at about the 7 to 10 day mark, they said, okay, well, we don't have any more time. We need to arrange this right now. If giving this child up for adoption is what we're going to do and what we have to do, then we need to do it now. Now we're at the deadline. And they both agreed, okay, we don't have any second thoughts. We just have to. We don't have any choice. We don't have any choice. This feeling is too dark and too cold, and they both felt, they never used the word evil, but what they felt was up there bumping the margins of evil. And they made an appointment. They went down to a doctor and said, just spilled their guts. They said, look, we don't know what to do. We do not want this child. We cannot have this child. We're not going to have this child. What can we do? And the doctor said, okay, you think about it overnight. Think about it tonight. And I'm going to meet you at such and such a place, a certain office tomorrow at such and such a time. And I'll have a bunch of papers, and you can sign them or not. They said, okay. They met him the next day, and they had no reservations whatsoever. They both cried through it, but there was no changing of minds. And they signed all the papers truthfully. They just they had to state a reason why they couldn't take care of the child. They said, look, we just can't. We have a bad feeling. We just can't. We don't want the child. Period. We don't want the child. That's it. And the doctor was very unemotional through the whole thing. He's probably seen it 10,000 times. And they said he gathered up the papers, said, okay, it's a done deal. There was no shaking of hands or congratulations or sorry or anything like that. He said, when you give birth in about a week, the baby will be taken. The nurses will take it out of the room. You will not ever see it again, and you will never know what happened to it. He said he promised that he was making arrangements with a very good agency that would give it a good home, and who were childless and who wanted very badly a baby and who had been trying to adopt for some years. And we didn't have to worry about the baby's care or being loved. That's it. Goodbye. And they went home, cried some more. No second thoughts. It was a done deal. About a week later, she went into labor, went into the hospital. She delivered. Quite a traumatic delivery. And the baby was taken by the nurse. The nurses in the delivery treated her unspeakably badly, rude, mean-boned. Well, can you fault them? They didn't know the backstory. Had they known the backstory, would they feel any differently? I don't know. Maybe abortion would have been another option. I don't know. The baby was taken at any rate and gone. She never saw it again. But she did. About 20-some years later, some attorney contacted her and said, well, this child has grown up. He still lives in your state, some distance from you, but he's still in your state. He wants to know if you want to contact him, if you want to meet him. And her words to her husband were immediately, no other words. Her face clouded over, he said. And she said, quote, no good will come from this. And the arrangements were made. Her first son wanted very badly to meet his brother. He didn't know anything about him. It was a boy. And he kind of shoved that through. And finally the time came, and they met the second boy with his family, and it did not go well. The two parents, the couple, were bound and determined to, you can't say make a fresh start, but certainly start from that point and go forward. The son clearly had issues. He was a little rude. I know because I was there. The parents were, reasonably intelligent people, nice people, very supporting of this boy, overly supporting probably. And over the next 6 months, they all got to know each other. It turned out that the biological parents had nothing in common with the adoptive parents. And they tried to be friends, kind of, sort of, but it wasn't in the cards, and nobody pursued it, and it faded away. The second son continued his acerbic behavior. He was somewhat demanding of the biological parents. He was accusatory to the biological parents. And little by little they learned, well, we all learned, of his troubles through his life. He had a history of being extremely violent, had some run-ins with the law, had run-ins with virtually every friend he ever had, most of them serious. He was a bad person. He was simply a bad human being. He was a bad human being. That's all there was to it. I tried to be his friend. I couldn't. I tried. I couldn't. I couldn't conjure forth any feeling toward him. I faked it as best I could, but there was no basis there for any kind of friendship. The older brother, the firstborn, tried harder than anyone I ever saw to forge a relationship with his newfound brother. In the end, that blew up quite a number of times because of really putrid behavior on the part of the younger brother. And it finally blew up completely, like a little atomic bomb. This kid, the second-born, had married a stripper from Las Vegas. Wonderful choice. And had a kid or two, I don't know. That went very, very badly. Everything about it went badly. Lots of fighting, police interventions, drinking, drugs. Just a shithole. The whole thing was a clusterfuck. The whole thing. This was a bad human being. And everywhere he went, that's what he left behind him. Little deer droppings of concentrated evil, kind of. Now, I lost track of them for quite a few years. But I did see a thing in the news about him. Somebody brought it to my attention. He apparently lured a woman to his house, drugged her with an overdose of insulin, and raped her apparently with every kind of inappropriate device one could ever imagine, until she was 99% dead from blood loss. According to the newspaper, he got scared at the last minute, called 911. They showed up, interviewed her as best they could. She said she feared for her life. They arrested him, went through a long trial where he contested everything. The parents supported him to the nth degree. She was a liar. She was this, she was that. You know, the physical injuries, she was in a hospital for quite a while trying to pull her through and save her life. According to the parents, the injuries were, contrived or made up or something by her to try to get him in trouble. Yeah, she did it to herself. Yeah, okay. He's in prison now. I think he's got another, I don't even know, 10 years left on the sentence. He appealed it, lost. And that's the end of that story for now. The point of this little story is to ask the question, to beg the question, is there a place in society for abortion? I'm not going to reveal how I think about it. It doesn't matter. What matters is how you think about it. All kinds of arguments about this case can go either way. Good arguments on both sides. I don't have the answer. Were I that father, what would I think now, all these years later, after seeing the trail of destruction this kid has left, and knowing that you foresaw it? Okay, people can be wrong. Maybe the father did foresee it. Well, he did, and the mother did too, but people can be wrong. Should they have killed him in an abortion procedure because of what was to them a little more than a hunch? Yeah, it was a really, really strong hunch. It was an overpowering hunch. But would that have given them the right to kill this child? Well, the woman he raped, who died not long after that, I don't know that she died directly as a result of these injuries. Certainly they weakened her to the point where it had to have been a contributing factor. What would she think? Should this guy have been aborted? I don't know. I tell the story just so people will think about it more than they have already. That's it. That's my entire reason for telling this story. Abortion, the issue of abortion, is something I think about somewhat. I'm beyond child having age, so it's not going to happen in my lifetime. I'm not going to be confronted with it in my lifetime, but I'm curious what society should be doing about this issue. Don't know. Okay, that's my story. Gives you something to think about. If you're thinking about abortion, thinking about adoption, thinking about sticking it out. Now, there's no question in my mind, had this couple kept this child, he would have destroyed the little family that they had that stayed happy forever. He would have destroyed it in 100 or 500 different ways. They made the correct decision to get this child out of their lives. But the issue I'm stuck wrestling with is, should they have done that and inflicted that evil, and it became a point of evil, should they have inflicted that evil upon those this kid was going to come in contact with, or should they have cut it off at the pass and saved everybody, including this kid's parents, one hell of a lot of trouble? I lean one way. I'm not going to tell you which way I lean. Doesn't matter. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just throwing this out there to give you something to think about if you are in a situation or you know someone in a situation similar to this. That's it. All tapes are copyright 2024 by stockphotosworldwide.com. Steal it, put it on your website, we'll sue you. We've done it before. We succeeded, we liked it, we can use the money. Do it again, please. We'll find out about it. Thank you very much, and good evening. And I should have a teleprompter, shouldn't I? I'm thinking. Okay, thank you very much, and good evening and good night.